Hello and welcome to another episode of the Disc and Dice podcast. This is episode 49, one away from our first real milestone, I reckon. With me, as always, are my co-hosts JT and Paul. And normally I'd pause here to let them say hello, but I forgot to say that. My name is Tim.
And that's the end of the podcast, guys.
There it is. We did it. Yep. Let's just get to 50 straight away. Just like.
See, JT, did you say that because of the big gap there? Because remember, that's not going to be there when I edit this, so that joke won't work.
Oh, damn it. I always forget. How is everybody?
I'm good. It's. I'm bracing myself for some very warm weather incoming this weekend. I don't know what the weather is like over there for you guys, but it's going to get pretty hectic the next couple of days.
Yeah, we got the same thing. I think it's like 41 tomorrow, so that's going to be some fun times.
Oh, and you know what? This will come as a shock to you guys and anybody else who knows me personally. Guess what I'm doing this weekend? I am sitting my hazard perception test on Sunday, and then my my P's test, my driver's license test on Monday.
Oh,
so at 32 years of age, I may potentially be able to drive on my own.
Well, I guess I was going to say congratulations, but I'll wait until you actually pass the test.
Yeah,
don't jinx me.
And let that be a advance warning to everyone in the Greater Melbourne area over the coming weeks.
That's like a classic boomer Facebook comment. It's like,
but that's what I was going to say.
Oh, look out, people!
Like JT bringing the dad joke.
Yeah, but seriously, there's a reason I haven't had my license until 32. So No, but I reckon I'm gonna have to, next time I'm in the same city as you guys, I'm just gonna have to like drive you guys around a whole bunch of different places just because I owe you that many lifts.
I remember old co-host Alan of the podcast when it originally started, but he got his license like probably 3 or 4 years after the rest of us did when we were all younger. And I remember like he had the same attitude. He's like, once I get this license, I'm designated driver for like a year just to pay back all of the trips that he's taken in other people's cars.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for, Timmy, because we just might pull you up on that. we might just get you to drive us around without any objective, just like, oh, well, let's go for a drive around Glenelg 4 times.
It's like a good friend logbook. I have to do my mandatory hours.
Yes. Yeah, we will hold you to that.
The hazard perception tests and stuff like that, do you do that in like a simulator type thing?
Yeah, so it's like a series of like animations, and it's like you're sitting in the cockpit of your car and you just click the mouse when you would need to react. And it tells you either too early, too early, too late, or you've reacted correctly. Luckily, the Vic Roads one has like them online, so I've just been like, the game I'm talking about this week is the practice Vic Roads hazard perception test.
That's what I was asking about, like the simulator nature of it. Is that well, this is content for next week then.
How good would it be if they like put a VR headset on me and like sit behind like a wheel with a pedal? No, but I actually have been like cramming. I've been doing yesterday or the day before. I sat there and I just did like every test over and over again. And like I was saying to Shayla, I could be in for some trouble if like these aren't the exact ones that they used for the actual test. Like if these are like dummy ones just to show me what it's like, because I don't think I'm learning to react at the right time. I was just like finding the points in each video. So instead of like watching the road and being like, all right, so I have to start slowing down here because that car's just put its indicator on, I'm like, in Simulation 3, when I drive past that bush on the left, I have to press the button.
Oh my God, it really is a game
already
now.
min-maxing his driving skills.
Speaking of games you've been playing, Timmy, we didn't have you on last week, which, of course, anyone who listened would have been aware of. So I think we thought we'd kick things off this time by finding out what you've been playing for the last month or so.
Yeah, so my not being in the last episode came at like the very last minute, and I was super disappointed because I have been playing this new board game, new to me. It's like a good 7 years old now, I think, or maybe like 4, but It's called Time Stories, and it's a board game. And I have enjoyed it so much that I was like super psyched to talk about it. But it ended up being kind of a blessing in disguise because I actually have now got the first expansion or like the next scenario, and I'll explain how that works in a second. So I've kind of got even more of a picture of this game and what it is moving forward that I can share with you guys. But I'll start with the basics. It's called Time Stories. The time is stylized as like T.I.M.E dot, like it's an acronym, and it stands for tachyon insertion into major events, which is very much like they've shoehorned it. They've gone the other way. They've called it Time Stories and then like made it an acronym after the fact. But I don't mind it. It's a bit of fun. Anyone familiar with like board games and having gone into board game shops and stuff might recognize the box if I describe it, because the thing that put it on my radar is it's got a really minimalist box. It's almost all just white, and then it's kind of got this sci-fi looking robot or pod thing just on the very far right of the box. It looks really clean, really crisp, which I think adds to the overall aesthetic, because as the name of the game might clue you in, this is a time travel game. And it's very highly conceptualized. Like you open it up and it's the first thing you read is a whole like welcoming you to the T.I.M.E organization or agency, time agency, and you're a temporal agent, and it's kind of like an induction. And it then has the kind of more meta kind of explanation, and they set their goal for Time Stories to be less like a single game, but more a framework for ongoing scenarios. And it's kind of meant to sit somewhere between a board game and role playing, which you guys know me. You know that's kind of my sweet spot. Like from hearing me talk about Gloomhaven and stuff, I kind of love a board game that has an element of role playing in it. This one you've got up to 4 players. If you play it, it's 2 to 4. If you play it with 2 people, you each control 2 characters. And essentially, the whole concept of the game is that in the far-flung future that you're in, there has been advances in technology which has allowed us to travel through time and also visit alternate timelines in some scenarios. And so you're part of an organization whose job it is to kind of maintain our timeline's wealth and health and good fortune by going back and making sure certain things do or don't happen. The core game comes with one scenario, and it is called Asylum, and you are going back to like 1940s Paris to an asylum where patients have been going missing, and we're trying to work out what exactly is going on there. So we often try to avoid getting into like the nitty gritty and the rules and stuff. So I'll keep it pretty high level, but essentially what happens is when they send you back in time, you go into what they call receptacles, which is kind of like the old Quantum Leap television series. You're basically going back in time into real people from that timeline's bodies, and you're possessing them in their location and time for a period. And I say for a period because each scenario, you have a certain amount of time. Like time is essentially your currency in this game. And everything you do costs you temporal units or TU. And every time you do something, you slide it down and you have to solve this scenario before you run out of time. And it's really cool because the deck has a whole bunch of items. It has a whole bunch of different locations. It has like a map of your overall location. And it also has a whole bunch of like successful or failed mission cards. Like it has a card you read if the mission is successful. And it has then it has a whole bunch of cards that are like, read this one if you failed the mission because you ran out of time. Read this one if you failed the mission because you ran out of time for a second time, and read this one if you just failed the mission for other reasons or whatever it might be. So it's really cool. And I'm going to stop there just because I'm conscious that like I'm talking a lot. Probably I'm excited because I haven't been here for for an episode. But have you guys got any questions so far?
Yeah, what is a mission?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because
Yeah.
I've got the, I feel like I've got a grasp of like the premise of the
Yep.
game, but yeah, like you say you sort of go into these things and you use like your time is your currency, or the other, what's it called, like the TU or whatever is like something you like a currency that you use. But like, what is involved in like doing a mission or solving these problems as you sort of as you mentioned before?
Yep, cool. So it's a really simple rectangular board. Like it's quite wide, but it's not very deep, and everything is on a big deck of cards. And essentially, what happens is when they send you back in time, it tells you on the card that starts the scenario. It says you start in the day room, and so you find the card set that says day room, and you set them out in a line in the designated place on the board, and it creates kind of like a panorama view of the room. And so the first card has a description of kind of what you're seeing. It says you're in the day room of some blah 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 asylum. On the far left of the room, you see a nurse smiling at you. Behind her, there's somebody doing a painting by the window. Further back in the room, you can see someone playing chess by themselves, etc., etc. And this is all represented in the panoramic picture you're seeing, made up of anywhere between 3 to 6 cards. And what happens is above them, there are spaces for where you put your pieces that represent your characters, and you all choose where you want to go in that room. And then you explore the room by flipping over the cards depending on where you are. When you do that, it's normally going to have a whole bunch of text, it'll be scenario stuff. Depending on what you turn over, it might also have some things for you to do. So, for example, we flip over the first one, and it's the nurse talking to you saying, "Hi, welcome. If you need anything, my name is Nurse Josephine." Da 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 da. Not much there. The next one, you flip it over and you're talking to a patient, and the patient might give you an item and it says collect item 4 from the deck. So you pick up the item deck and you take that and you have a look at it and you go, okay, cool. I got a newspaper here. It says something about patients going missing, not really giving me heaps of information. Other things that can happen is the way you interact with the world is the common board game mechanic of dice rolling tests. So your characters that you play, so your receptacles, the people from this time that you are in the bodies of, have some skill levels. It's pretty basic. They normally have like a combat skill. In this first scenario, it's combat. They call it glibness, which is like talking and convincing people or bluffing and that kind of stuff.
I like that
And
as
then,
a name for like, what would otherwise be called
yeah,
charisma or something like that.
yes, exactly. Glibness kind of tells you your attitude towards everyone in this time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So combat, glibness, and dexterity in this one. Is it dexterity? It represents that. But yeah. So you might have to do a test by rolling a dice. The dice you have aren't like 1 to 6s. They have hit counters on them. So like you roll it if you're fighting someone and they have like 3 health points, you have to get 3 successful hits. They've also got skulls on them because bad things can happen. As they've got blank sides as well. So that's kind of the what you're doing at a non-story level, just like very mechanically. You are rolling dice to see if you pass certain tests. But of course, the way it works is it doesn't cost you anything to flip over those cards and read what's on them. But then if you want to stay there and try to pass the test, you need to spend the time to do it. So you slide the timer down 1 and everybody gets to take an action. From that point, their action can be moving to another point of that location, so another point in that room, or it can be moving to something that's already been discovered, or it can be fulfilling the requirements of a card that you've already revealed. You can stay there for as long as you want, but of course, you do have that time. And I'm going to stop here and mention one thing that I think leans into the role-playing part of this game. In the instructions, it says anybody who was on the place where on the spot where you're flipping over a card to read it can read that card, but you're not really meant to read it aloud. The people who are on the place read it to themselves, and they have encouraged players to they can talk about what they're doing. They can say, hey, I'm here, I'm talking to a patient. He said something about a newspaper article and I've got it here. But unless another character is there with you on the spot, they don't want you to actually just read it out verbatim. They want it to be kind of like, you're collaborating, not just all reading the same thing at the same moment in time.
So I'm kind of curious, Timmy, about the time aspect. And forgive me if I haven't been following along with what you've been explaining so far, but is it really boiled down to sort of just like, is it just a flavor theme text to the game, or is there some kind of mechanic that does aim to emulate the time travel outside of just, like you mentioned, you go back in time and possess these bodies? Is there, obviously, a game can't have actual time travel in it, but is there something in the game that you would call a mechanic that is like intrinsically meant to be like that time travel aspect?
So you have the big counter in the middle of the board where like it costs lots of money to the taxpayer of this 23rd century or wherever we're from to send us back. And so there's lots of pressure on us to get this job done. However, I will say that it seems very much to me like this setup game was designed to not give you enough time to successfully finish the mission the first time. And you were meant to take multiple runs at it. So you really do get the feeling that you've been leapt into these bodies for a brief moment in time. Once you run out of time, you do have a base deck, which is you in your time travel center in the century you come from, and they say, come on guys, this is no good, I'm going to send you back again, rah 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 rah. And there are some things that you can uncover, some items that have a certain icon on them, which you get to stick with when you go back in time, like things you've learned from the last run, so that when you come at it again, you can go to certain locations that were locked to you on the first pass at it. So while they don't explain like the time travel mechanic, and it's not like you have to be careful not to make a loop or whatever it is, they do have things that hold over because, when I go back in for my second attempt, I'm starting at the same location at the same point in time. So of course I'm going to know where I need to go the next time. I'm going to know which other rooms in the asylum are pointless for me to try and travel to. Because it costs you extra time when you go from, say, the day room to the kitchen or to the dormitory or to the promenade. When you decide there's nothing in this location, I'm going to move, you roll the time captain dice, and it says to get from that location to this location, it's going to cost you 3 TU, temporal units. So you have to be clever about where you're going and in what order. We failed the first run, and then we read the mission failed due to running out of time card, and it said, well, you guys, it was your first go, but this costs us money, so get in there, have another go, but don't fuck this next one up.
So would it be sort of like akin to, it's less about having a consequence of something you did in a past run and more about learning to manage the time better for future runs?
It certainly seems like that at first, but when you successfully complete it, there is a ranking system of how well you did it, and it takes into account how many runs it took, takes into account how much time you had left on the run that you successfully completed it at. And once it assigns you that point ranking, then it gives you perks that go into the next run or the next scenario you play. And that only happens after a successful completion of the scenario. And not only that, we noticed that there were a couple of items that we picked that you can get that says this does nothing for you now, but it could come in handy on a future scenario. So they've made this base game knowing full well that it's going to have a series of scenarios coming out after the fact. And although this one very much feels like a kind of a tutorial thing, there are enough surprises that make you go, oh, that they knew we were going to fail this and they wanted to show us what happens when you fail it. Because we failed it twice and then it said, all right, this is your last chance. We're going to give you a little bit more time. Gave us more time and we already had the hindsight of doing 2 failed runs. So we were able to do it heaps better. We knew where to skip. We knew which items would make life easier. We knew which ones we didn't need. And it was trial and error. We'd already thought we knew, and then we didn't get one item, did something slightly different, and desperately needed that item that we'd left behind. And then, yeah, there were these extra items that were completely useless to us in this scenario. But, in a scenario upcoming, maybe it would have come in handy. We don't know what it's used for yet. It's kind of very cool.
I like the sort of repeating missions. Like that sounds like the bit that's like sort of to JT's question. That sounds like the part, like the mechanic that is replicating time travel. Like like getting rewards from the missions. I feel like you could have that kind of thing in a game with any sort of setting. But I like the idea that the missions are made to be replayed and that there's a reason for that. I think that's kind of a cool way to make the time travel part of the mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, it's really cool. There is some secret stuff in the box as well that, like, we read a card and it said, hey, by the way, check this. And like there was stuff that we hadn't even come across in the box that was really cool. Like it's they've really thought it out.
I'm kind of curious. So while you've been talking, I've just been having a quick look at sort of, what it looks like and the bit of the summary on a board game website. And it mentions what's called a save insert. Looks like obviously it's so you can, if you are short for time, you can sort of take a snapshot of your game. But have you done that yet? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's another thing that is really, really cool. First of all, I think this game has a really, really nice runtime. It says like 90 minutes per run is what they guess. And I think the first one we did was about 90 minutes, but every subsequent run we did so much quicker than that. Like the first time we played, we did 1 run, 90 minutes. We were like, okay, all right, we kind of get it now. We'll play again maybe tomorrow night. The next night, we did 2 runs back to back because we did one, we failed. We were like, oh, but we got it now. We know exactly where we have to go, what we have to do. Say we were doing that first run, though, and we ran out of time. What it has in the box is the inserts. Normally, you just stack the cards into a couple of piles and put all the pieces back where they go, but it has these kind of slots. So you can go, if we've unlocked these parts of the map already, we can separate them and leave them here. And then it has little spots next to each of the colored tokens that represent your characters, so you can put the items and the life counters and whatever else you might have directly next to your character's piece, so that next time you open the box you can go, all right, so these are in the little save insert, so we know that we'd already opened up all of this stuff and you just set it back up how you were going, which is, it's so simple. I looked at it and I went, that is remarkably cool. And I cannot believe that no other game I've played has this function. Like, it's just a little bit of extra space in the box that you put the cards you've already unlocked and the unique items. There's a spot next to your character piece. No brainer. It's really cool.
It's interesting that from the way you're describing the game, like, it doesn't sound like it's super rules heavy. Like, the missions don't sound like they've got sort of like a lot of systems and tokens and, kind of like counting and adding up stuff that some of these games often have. But the broader philosophy of the game, like you're saying, sounds like it's not made to be a simple game that you just play once. It's made to be a game that you play over and over again. It's made to be kind of a game that you come back to and get better at. And I feel like that's an interesting mix, of like, from what you said, relatively straightforward rules, but it still is kind of a bit hardcore.
Well, yeah, like, and it's interesting because now that I've played the second scenario, which is called the Marcy case, and it's set in 1992 NT, which I believe stands for normal timeline. maybe natural timeline. I'm not sure, but your timeline all the same. And what I've learned playing both of these now is that yes, the core mechanics aren't necessarily heaps rule heavy. About the only things you need to properly understand is how and when time is spent. It took me a little while to work out when I move to a new location and I have to roll the time captain dice to spend that time. Do I then also have to spend time to move my people within that location? And you don't at first. So the first mission, I was spending more time than I needed to, but I was not spending it elsewhere, and so it kind of cancelled out. Now I've got a handle on it. And the other thing is the combat rolls, because there's a few different things in there that can happen. And there's a thing called a riposte, which is kind of like, have you guys both played Elder Sign with me?
Don't think so.
You know how like you have to roll the dice and kind of get the dice faces that card says, but if you roll the little tentacle, which is a terror, and you're not successful, then you get like something bad happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
This has a similar mechanic. So in a combat roll, if you roll a couple of hits and a skull, and there is a skull on the card that you're trying to test against, then they get to do a riposte or riposte. I think it's like a fencing term. And that's essentially a counter attack. And then you have to look at your defense and stuff like that. So combat and spending time are about the only big rules, but each scenario kind of has its own additional rules. Like, for example, in the Asylum one of the characters, all of the characters in that one kind of have cool abilities and then drawbacks. Like one character I played was a cocaine addict. And so he started the game with a number of blue counters that represent hits of cocaine. And I could use them whenever I wanted to roll an extra dice, which is really handy. But if I ran out of them, then I was -1 health for the remainder of the game. And that is cool, but it's not just limited to that character, because then there were certain places in the game where you could get extra cocaine from. He could give the cocaine to certain NPCs that you come across. They're like, hey, I'll give you this key if you can give me a bump. And I had to make the decision, do I not do that and try to roll this guy for the thing and save my cocaine? You know, other people can use the cocaine for different reasons as well. So it became that all blue counters in this scenario were cocaine, regardless of whether you were playing with the character that was the cocaine addict or not. Stuff like that. The next scenario, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say, but the next scenario is essentially a bit of a zombie story. It's the government's been doing experiments and something's gone wrong, and you're in this all but abandoned town, and you have weapons in this one. So you're in an asylum in the other one, so you're just people. You know, you can pick up certain things, but there's no real weapons. In this one, you are ex-military and an FBI agent and a private investigator. So you've all got guns. One of you's got a knife and stuff, and the skills are different. Instead of having combat, glibness, dexterity, you have the 3 abilities are hand-to-hand combat, firearms, and searching ability. And when you use a firearm, the extra rule that this scenario has is that you have to put a counter on a certain card in what's called the codex that represents noise. And if at any point you have 5 counters on that noise card, when you go to change locations, you have to pull a card from this special street deck. So it's called the Streets. And, you know, you've attracted interest to where you are because you've been making noise firing off your guns. And so then you have to have this extra encounter just getting from one place to another place. It could be a fight, or it could mean you have to hide out and burn heaps of time. Like, so each scenario has kind of a couple of extra rules to add flavor to that. And that's kind of where you said it wasn't particularly rule heavy, and I would still say it's not, but there are certain little tweaks that each scenario seems to have.
And you said that like they're adding more scenarios, and did you say like you've got an extra scenario or something? Like how many are in the box, and do they sell them as like expansions?
Yeah, so in the first box, there's just one, and it's called Asylum. And then there are about 7 that have been released since.
Okay.
And they're bought like expansions.
Yeah. In terms of like replaying the game? Like it sounds like there's a persistency there in that, like when you and Shayla go back and play the next game of this, will you keep like items and things like that you've got from previous missions? Does it carry on like that, or do you kind of start from scratch each time?
So, you know how I mentioned the kind of the ranking system when we successfully finished the asylum scenario? That gave us a couple of things that they call beacons. So you can't really take items, and I'm doing that with like finger quotes because there are things called items in the game, because the items are unique to the scenarios, because you don't take stuff back in time with you. You transfer back into these bodies and you have whatever those people had on them.
Yeah.
And then when you finish, you come back into your body and you take nothing from the past back with you either. But you get these things called, we got a couple of things called beacons, and you get more or less of these depending on how well you complete your scenario. We got one that essentially at any run that we want to use, we can snap the beacon and it will give us an extra 3 temporal units, which like we finished the scenario when the one we finished to get them, we finished it with literally 0 time left. It was like save the cheerleader, save the world. It was down to the wire, which is good because it's meant we are being so stingy with that beacon. We absolutely don't want to use it because we're like, we're going to fail this one a couple times probably. It seems like that's how the game is set up. There's a bit of replayability. We need to unlock certain things. We need to learn where to go. So we want to save it until we're like, oh, we could see the end if we had more time, and then we'll crack it.
So what would happen then if like JT and I turned up and the 4 of us wanted to play a game? Would we play with the sort of things that you guys have unlocked in that sense, or would that start from scratch again? Like I'm because it sounds a little bit like there's almost like a legacy game aspect a bit to this, or like you say, maybe a bit more like a role-playing campaign or something. But yeah, so how does that work?
I think this game would benefit from being played with the same people in general. However, I think there wouldn't be very much of a barrier if you were starting a scenario together. So, for example, like the first one's a lot of fun. I could see Shayla and myself very happily going, like you and JT are here, as per your hypothetical, going, let's just play it again. You'll get a feel for it, and we'll try to not let our knowledge of this level color us too much. And you know what? In a couple months' time, it's the kind of game that there's so many places to go and so many cards and stuff that I think I'd start forgetting. So it'd be fine. But if I got a new scenario, all I'd need to say is, oh, hey, we've got this thing that's going to give us more time if we want to use it. That's the only holdover from the last mission. Apart from that, you know as much as we know, because each time they don't go, all right, you did this, and so you know this, and now we're sending you here to follow the same person. There's nothing like that. They're wildly different timelines. Like that first one was in the 40s. This next one's in the 90s. I think the next one is ancient Egypt. So like there's really no thread running between them in terms of stuff you must know from having done the first one.
How much do they charge for a new scenario?
I think the Marcy case was maybe about $40.
Okay, so it's quite expensive, I would say.
It's substantial, but like we're getting a lot of play out of it, you know. Like the core set I think was 70.
The one that comes with
good.
like one scenario.
Yeah, and I mean like we played that like 3 times before we finished it, and we absolutely loved it. And I mean in terms of time spent, you know, if it was a video game, we spent maybe, let's generously say we spent 4 or 5 hours all up between the 3 runs and learning it all and stuff. I did not feel like I was ripped off at all. Because I enjoyed it so much, and knowing that this is giving us the framework for everything else. Also, one thing that, you know, kind of eases the blow of, you know, $40 for just a single other scenario. they're very different, like aesthetically. Like they get different artists in to do the cards. Like in the core one, you have a plan up in the top left corner of the board, which is a map of all the places you can go. So you can go, let's go from the dormitory to the kitchen. And in the core game, that was like a blueprint, the looking down of the hospital. In the Marcy case, which is the next one that I said is kind of like a zombie one, it looks like comic book art. Like it's a
Yeah, okay.
it's a scene of the town, and like whereas the panoramas in the core game were kind of like panorama on one side, and you flip it over and it was like individual images. On this next one, when you flick it over, it's a different panorama. So you've got the copy and everything, but like the picture still stays connected, which like means this scene kind of unfolds in front of you. I noticed that it's a different name on the box, which means they do have like different people coming in and putting their spin on that. So you're getting at something like quite different. And different fonts, different layouts to the cards, like the core stuff, like your abilities and stuff, like obviously they're in the same spot, so it's not too confusing. But it's not just like the cards in the first one are red and the cards in the second one are blue. They're like completely different art styles. So there's an element of you don't know what you're going to get, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's cool. That's like, yeah, I did get that sense that they were kind of significantly different between scenarios, which is like, yeah, that's an easier sell than, yeah, like you say, kind of. I guess I was kind of thinking of it like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other games where you have like okay, maybe like something like Thornwatch, where Thornwatch has a number of different missions you can go on. I guess I was thinking of it like you're buying extra missions for Thornwatch, like just in that very, very general sense. But yeah, the way you're describing it there, it's like they come with their own mechanics and stuff, which is cool.
Yeah, I understand that. Like, it's interesting because it's a game that has like immediate replayability because you want to do it 3 or 4 times until you get it just right. But then after that, does the replayability stop? And therefore, does that make that $40 per extra scenario all of a sudden seem a bit steep?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like buying a Magic Planeswalker deck for like $25, and then you can just keep playing with that deck for ages and ages and ages. It's like buying a deck, because that's all the expansion is. It's just more cards. Everything else came in the core set.
Yeah, I guess it's that like like you say, because you think it's something that you can learn and kind of master, then it's like I know you said like you could forget it and play it again, but I guess at some point like the use is kind of finite at some level, if you know what I mean.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, I definitely feel like I could see myself going back and playing it again with different people, or even with Shayla once we've had enough time to kind of forget about it a bit, and it'll start coming back to us while we're playing. But definitely not anytime soon. I'm very excited to continue moving through the new scenarios. And I think there's another one coming out this year, so they're still making it. There's lots of content, so if you're invested in it, you're not going to run out of content. But of course, like you said, it is an investment as well. So I think that I more than made up for missing last fortnight's episode. Talking your ears off about Time Stories there. But what about you guys? Who's been playing something interesting?
Well, I've been also playing a board game to sort of keep that theme going.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I've been playing a game called Tang Garden, which is a game that friend of the pod, Butters, picked up, and he'd been wanting to play it for a while, and so we hung out to give this one a go. And like broadly speaking, the game is it's a game where you build a garden by placing like tiles and decorations and different things like that, and it kind of has like a classical Chinese aesthetic. So it's like it's got sort of all kind of Chinese decorations and sort of Chinese architecture in sort of the buildings that you build and things like that. So it's very much themed around like I don't want to take a random guess at what era of Chinese history we're talking about here, but it's sort of it's got a historical aesthetic in that sense. And it leans very heavily on that sort of style. So like the miniatures and the decorations and the art of the game and everything like that is all very much in that kind of style. And the game kind of nails that fantasy in a way of sort of building this sort of relaxing garden throughout the game. The sort of aim of the game is you play a character and you basically have to contribute to building this garden, and then at the end you kind of add up a whole bunch of points based on your character. So you might have a character who likes water and certain trees, and so you have to try and build a garden that gives you the most like enjoyment points from that garden in a very broad sense.
So the first thing that jumps out to me, right, is the way you've been describing it. It sounds like that kind of very zen, like you're getting enjoyment points, right? So like it almost feels counterintuitive that it then becomes competitive with the points. So although you add the points up at the end, and I'm sure whoever wins is excited to discover that they've won or whatever, but did you feel a big sense of competition? Did you guys get really competitive when you were building this, or did it really feel like doing it for the enjoyment and doing it together and having some fun, and then whoever won at the end was just kind of incidental?
So you have already hit the nail on the head for my biggest issue with this game. So you're absolutely right. Like the aesthetic and the vibe of the game is totally like, it's totally zen. It's totally about this relaxing garden with this kind of beautiful sort of hand painted aesthetic and everything like that. You're putting like fish in the rivers and planting trees on the ground and things like that. But the game is, rules-wise, the game is so heavy on rules and maths. And I think there is a really stark like dissonance between the sort of the kind of tone of the game in terms of the look and the setting and things like that, and then the way the game actually plays out in terms of mechanics. So like I'm not going to even try and get into rules on this because it's a very, very complicated game, or it was for me at least. There are so many interconnecting rules and systems. Like you have your character, and then you have like, I'm trying to remember exactly. It's been a couple of weeks since we played actually, but you sort of you take turns kind of placing tiles in the garden the way you would in those kind of games where you build the board as you play. There's sort of a few of them like that. The first one I can think of off my head is something like Zombies, things like that. You do that kind of thing. You build the garden with tiles as you play, but then you have a phase where you can put decorations down, or then you have like 4 extra abilities that you can use throughout the game. But all of these systems have so many like ifs and buts associated with them, and they are all so tightly interconnected with every other system in the game that you very much feel like you're doing maths when you're playing. Like once you get past that learning phase where you're kind of like, oh, how does a turn even work? Exactly like you say, Timmy, you realize that the point of the game is to win, and the way to win is to have the most points. So very quickly, every turn, what you're doing is you're calculating in your head, if I put this tree here and line my character up here, I get double points from this tree and then a bonus from this thing on the side of me, all kinds of things like that. Like you are min-maxing very, very quickly into this game. And like, I don't mind that kind of game. Like I don't mind a game where you kind of are adding up your points all the time and trying to win like that, but it really does seem at odds with the sort of vibe that the game puts out.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's really interesting. Um like almost disappointing. Like I'm a big fan of like the kind of aesthetic that this game has. I've had a glance at what it looks like, and there are other similar games out there that have that aesthetic that now have leapfrogged that one easily. And just in general, I've got a little bonsai tree out the back. I really like the little zen gardens that you rake the sand in the trays and stuff. Like this seems right up my alley, but now probably not so much. I did have another question that kind of is coming out of conversations we've had privately, because when I was telling you guys about this game that I wanted to talk about it, one of the things I mentioned was that I thought the rule book was laid out really, really nicely. Like, there was no skipping backwards and forwards going, oh, wait, did I miss something? I understood all the terms as we were going through it. And then towards the end of it, it said, hey, now you're ready to play. This is how we suggest you explain the rules to your friends. If you're the one person that knows the rules and no one else does, you should focus on these things, do this bit of the game first, and then answer any specific questions people still have after that. I thought that was really cool, just that they've taken the time to be like, this is going to make it easier for you to explain it. And when I said that, Paul, you said, yeah, I've got something to say about rule books as well. Was it kind of just what you've been touching on there, or were the rules not very well explained to begin with for you either?
Yeah, they weren't very well explained. Like the rule book, to be honest, the rulebook probably, I don't know if this was a Kickstarter, maybe it was, but I think they probably just needed to hire like a proper editor to do the rulebook, because there's a lot of, like, you know how when you have a board game, it has its own terminology and that stuff is just kind of consistent across the game. It just felt like sometimes they would use one word for something and then they wouldn't use the exact same word when talking about it later. And that's really confusing in the rules for a board game. You know, like if you call something a decoration, then you always use the word decoration. Don't call it an item later or something like that. And there's lots of just things like that where we were reading the rule book and we're kind of like, I think this is what it means, but it wasn't clear if it was. And it also just felt like the way you're talking about Time Stories is that it had a very well thought out sort of format to how you learn the rules and then how you explain them. This one really didn't. It didn't feel like that. Like, we spent the whole game kind of pouring through the rule book and sort of figuring out, because there are so many exceptions. That's probably the biggest thing. It's like there were no systems in the game where it's just, this is how they work and you play. It's like as soon as we started, we were like, oh, this is how you place a tile. But then, you know, if you do this, this thing happens. If you place this kind of tile, then this thing happens. And everything just had so many exceptions and things that would happen because of the specific situation. And yeah, just like, I don't think the rulebook did a particularly good job of explaining all of those.
Just looking at like images of the game obviously being played and being set up, there are so many components. Like,
Yeah.
how long did it take? Ages to set up, like to even just get going?
It didn't actually take that long. And I actually have to say that we picked up the rules very quickly. So I wouldn't say that it's like, it's a game that's like, it's so complicated, it's difficult to learn. Like, I would say once we learnt it, the game moved quite quickly. And I think if I played future games of it, you would get through them relatively fast. But my biggest issue there is just that it's very competitive, it's very min-maxy, and it just doesn't quite fit the vibe of what I thought I was going to get from that kind of game. It's not that it's a bad game. Like, I think if you really, really like that kind of competitive min-max style game, you would really enjoy this, because you could just ignore the aesthetic and play it like you're solving maths puzzles, basically, the whole way through. So if you're that kind of person, I think like this game would definitely appeal to you. But yeah, if you're going into it thinking you're going to get something which replicates like relaxing in a Zen garden, I don't think that's really the case.
So JT and I have spoken about on here before a game called Carcassonne.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've played it, Paul, but it's kind of like set medieval, kind of looks like Europe, and you build the map as you go, kind of like how you said with zombies. And like, you put down an item here, and it might have like a bit of a road, and then you put down another one, and it has like a dead end, and then you can score that road or whatever, and you put in your little people on certain parts, and it becomes their farmers, and you get points for how big their farm ends up growing and stuff like that. That kind of seems similar to me to what you're describing, with an aesthetic that works better, because you can just try to do as much as you want and then see how many points you got at the end. Or you can sit there and be like, all right, my farmers are earning me this much at the moment, and this road here is this many long, so I've got that, and you can kind of try and keep track of it as well. Is that kind of like, it's not decorations and it's not putting fish in rivers and stuff, and it's you don't do stuff to the board pieces once they're down, but is that kind of a similar kind of the point scoring mathematical problem vibe that you're trying to describe?
Yeah, pretty much. So you basically, you have a character who has certain sort of characteristics
I
and
see.
certain like special abilities. And so you might have a character who gets a point for because it's like this garden. The idea is basically they get points for kind of what they're looking at. So you get a character who maybe gains points for every garden tile that they're looking at in their kind of line of sight, and they gain points for maybe any extra points for any trees that have been put on those garden tiles and things like that. And so they'll all have every character has sort of a different way of scoring points, and it is actually quite an interesting system. So you get your first character, which is an interesting point I'll mention in a minute. You get your first character and it has those kind of characteristics on it. So you might have, like I said, a character who wants garden tiles with trees on them, and those are the things that will score you points. So then what you do is you start out the game by trying to do that, right? You try to build like a line of garden tiles with trees that you can then position that character so that they're looking along that line, so they gain those points. And then what happens is at a certain point in the game, you unlock the ability to get your second character. And when you get your second character, you place your first character permanently on the board. And so at that point, you put that character down, perhaps looking along those trees and gardens that you've set up, knowing that at the end of the game, when you calculate everything, they'll gain points for all of that stuff. And then you have a new character. And maybe this new character has the total opposite set of things which make them like happy in the garden. So then, you kind of have to switch at that point. And maybe you were all about trees and gardens, and maybe now you're all about like bridges and pagodas and things like that. So now you've got to make sure that you have like bridges to put down and you've got the right decorations to make this character happy. And I thought that was quite a cool system. So you don't kind of start the game with one character and you spend the whole game building a garden to suit that. You switch as you go throughout the game, and there's a bit of kind of flexibility there in terms of when you switch characters. So it's like you unlock the ability to do it, but you don't have to do it straight away. So you kind of got to make a choice there. Like, do you want to keep building for the character you've got to get more points? Or do you want to take the risk of locking that character in on the board and drawing a new character at random, and you don't know what their kind of characteristics will be, but maybe it will suit you, maybe it won't. So that was quite an interesting dynamic, I thought. And I think you can get up to like 3 or 4 characters in a single game. If you kind of advance up the tracker, you can unlock quite a few characters and place quite a few down. So you could theoretically do like 2 characters in a game and do lots with them, or you could do 4 characters and just do a little bit to please each of those.
What is the advantage of swapping to a different character instead of just doing as much as you possibly can with one? Is it that you'll run out of trees to place, and so you might as well move to a bridges character? Or is it that if you have 2 characters, there's some kind of points modifier for having 2? Like, what, like, if it's a risk, what encourages you to take the risk?
Well, the board is limited in terms of space. So, like, I can't remember how many tiles across the board it is, but it's probably like 5 or 6 tiles, like, either way across the board. And so when you place a character, they're looking along a row of tiles. So at most, they're probably looking along 5 tiles, and each tile can only have 1 decoration. So, in a given row, it would be unlikely that you would get to place every single one of those tiles exactly like you wanted. So you probably get to a point where you look at the board and you think, I'm going to put my character down now because that's the best I can do with this character, and I'm going to move on to another one. Because, you can't infinitely build out the garden. It has sort of like set boundaries. I guess another reason you would change is you do build up cards in your hand in terms of like decorations and items and things like that. So you may look at the cards in your hand and think they have absolutely no benefit with this character. So you're just going to bail on this one and get a new one, because if you get something that's better, then you could be scoring a lot of points right away with that one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get that. I agree with you. That changes things. That is a very cool mechanic. Like, before you said that, I was just like thinking, all right, well, Carcassonne already exists, and the aesthetic and the gameplay don't have the dissonance that you've described. So what is this game's advantage? Like, unless you like are very invested in how it looks, like why would you go for this one? But that having a character that modifies that, and I suppose it is like you have kind of like 3 or 4 different ways to score points in Carcassonne, and everyone's going for the same stuff. So I suppose this has that element of, you playing the game very differently to the person sitting across from you. So yeah, but some ticks in the pros column there as well.
Yeah, that is how it works. You kind of you're building a different garden to the other person, and then the garden you're building switches mid game based on character. So that is a cool thing. But like I know I've probably like sounded quite negative on this game. Like I had fun while I was playing it. Like I had a good time, but like, would I buy it? Definitely not. Would I play it again? Like, if there are other games on offer, probably not. But like there are some games that you play once and you have a good time and you never play them again. You know what I mean? Like, not every game has to be a game that I say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like buy all the expansions and play this for 2 years. It's like, yeah, this game was enjoyable to play a couple of times, but like, it's not a game that I would go back to in a hurry.
Yeah. I had one more question, just because you said something there that I might have missed before. I didn't realize that you are building individual gardens.
No, you're not.
Oh, you're not?
No. So you're building one garden together, but the kind of garden you're trying to build is different to the other players because they have different characters.
Sweet. Gotcha. All right, that makes heaps more sense. I was about to be like, what is the point of playing this with with somebody else?
Well, it's interesting.
I was gonna say, do you have cards that let you mess up their garden, but you're building one map together, so you're competing for space and getting the stuff in there that you want. So yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, it does actually have a single player mode apparently, which I didn't try, and like I said, I'm not going to rush out and see what that's like. But it does have a single player mode, and I did kind of wonder whether the single player mode might be more enjoyable, because like I don't know, like I don't know if they still add a competitive aspect. Maybe you're playing against like, a certain score that you have to meet. But I wondered whether maybe just playing it on your own and trying to like get the best score you can might actually be a more enjoyable way to play it than against other people. I don't know.
There's certainly the potential for that, I reckon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess where is the challenge aspect, I suppose, of a single player game would become my next question,
Yeah. Like I guess like
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess you could see it almost like something like Minecraft in a way, like you play that just to build. Like maybe you could play Tang Garden just to build if you really liked the aesthetic and you really enjoyed like the other mechanics, but yeah. I don't know. Like, look, it's like I said. I think if I was going to recommend this game, I would recommend it more to people who like competitive min-max type games more than I would recommend it to people who like the classical Chinese aesthetic. I think that the stronger component of the game that comes through is that like maths heavy competitive side.
Fair enough. So if you like Pokemon trading card game,
yeah,
and
basically
looking for something different.
Hey, look, like there's a lot of people out there who like those kind of games.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people who they're just like the numbers being high and they're like winning. And I don't think that's either of us three, but yeah, I've definitely met a lot of people who have a very different philosophy on how they approach games. Speaking of complicated games, so Tang Garden is pretty complicated, but JT, I feel like if this is a competition here between who has played the most complex involved game, then I reckon what you're going to talk about this week may take the cake.
I reckon it just might, really. And it's not a board game. It's back to classic old video games. And I have been getting into a game that was on my radar for a long time called Automation, or the full title, I believe, is Automation: The Car Company Tycoon Game. And where do I start? Like, it's It is a simulator. It is a tycoon type game. So your planet coaster, your city skylines, your business management or economic management style game. But there are other components to this game that switch it up a little bit. And it's really at its heart a game where you are designing cars and selling cars to a market. And that's kind of what you're doing. The thing that really got me intrigued in this game when I first saw it on Steam was not so much the business management aspect, although I knew that was a big part of it. It was the complete freedom to design your car's engines and the trim of the car in like crazy detail. Um, as far as car customization goes, a lot of games like even GTA and Forza, Need for Speed, they have this car customization aspect. That's usually, it's a feature of the game. It's one of the selling points that they like to tell people about. Do not hold a candle to this kind of level of detail and customization in automation. Yeah, it's just it's next level. I mean, we use the term a lot, granular. This is about as granular as you can get in terms of an automotive game that doesn't have actual racing in it or actual driving. Yeah, but I've probably put in about 10 hours so far, and look, I've really, really enjoyed it. It is a sometimes game. It's not one where I can probably sit down and keep going back to it, but you know, I've got a save game in it. I'm started the campaign and I'm sort of like intermittently going into it between other games, and I'm really, really enjoying it.
So you previously have talked about Car Mechanic Simulator, and I had a bit of a look at some kind of screenshots of automation, and from what I saw, like it looked similar, like similar-ish in terms of you kind of have your car there and you sort of can pull it apart and work on it and things like that. Like what's the difference here between those two? Is it just like a much more detailed simulation in that sense, or is the kind of business side of the game, the like car tycoon stuff, is that sort of what sets it apart?
I wouldn't say the two games are any kind of similar outside of the fact that there is at some point in the game there's a car that you're designing or working on in a car garage.
Yeah, right.
That's actually that's probably where the similarities end. Car Mechanic Simulator, obviously, it models all the parts and components of the car, but it's probably a bit more superficial than what you see in automation. I'll give you like a bit of a rundown of the the flow of the game. So the first thing you do in campaign mode, anyway, there's like a sandbox mode where you don't do any of the car company tycoon stuff. If you just want to like design an engine in a car, but the first thing you do is you pick your name of your automation company, and you pick a starting time. I think it defaults to the earliest. So when I did it, it was 1946. That's where when your company starts, and you then pick a demographic that you want to sell a car to, and there's hundreds of demographics. So I think it's kind of like it tells you the ones based on what the current population demand is. So I think you also you before right before that actually you pick a country, and the countries have different sort of scenarios on how that affects the demographic. So they're fictional companies, but they're kind of based on real ones. So there's like the American market where it's got like a lot of people who have disposable incomes and they're more interested in like luxury at that point in time. Then there's like the Eastern European market where people aren't really too interested in how good a car looks. They just want something that's a bit more reliable. And then there's the European market as well, uh, I believe it was a European market. Oh no, sorry, the Asian market, which has a different set of rules again. So I picked the American one just because that seems to be more the default mode. Then you pick your demographic, as I mentioned. I picked a family car because back in 1946, obviously, it's like right after the Second World War. There's a lot of families getting created, and so that's what the easiest demographic to slide into as a new manufacturer is. If you wanted to, you could be like, all right, cool, I'm just going to start making production and sports cars. You could do that as well, but it's a lot harder to get into the market and sell your cars. So having done that, the game then says, do you want to start your car from scratch, or do you want to have an AI engineer team sort of look at the demographics and sort of pre-make some of the components or some of the design for you so it's a little bit easier? I chose to start from scratch because I sort of just wanted to know the entire process myself. Then it says then you're in the engine designer. So when I say the engine designer, it's a fully 3D, it's basically a CAD program. It's like you can make everything different about your engine, including obviously what type the engine is, but you're also picking what the pistons are made out of, what the head gasket's made out of, what the exhaust manifold is made out of. Like absolutely everything that would have been available back in 1946, you're fully in control of, including the engine's shape, its displacement, like absolutely everything. There's not anything that they have left out in this kind of process. So I think I spent like probably 3 or 4 hours just designing my first engine. And that's like going through all the prompts. So after the engine designer, then you choose your car's trim. So that basically, for the uninitiated, that's your like, is it going to be a sedan? Is it going to be a convertible? Is it going to be like a pickup? And then you can make like the variants of that. And again, this is like a fully 3D rendered engine creation situation where you're kind of like adjusting, the angles of the car, making it more aerodynamic, picking different types of light fixtures or spoilers or whatever you're doing. And then the trim is also your drivetrain, your brakes. What kind of brake system is it? Is it rigid suspension? Is it soft suspension? What are you making the suspension out of? Is it cheap materials? Is it expensive, experimental materials? And after you've done all that, you then have the option to do a test of the car, and it tells you what went wrong in the test. Maybe you made your engine a bit too big. Maybe the displacement's too big and the engine starts to knock. That's going to be bad for the target demographic because, a family car is meant to be a smooth ride. So you have to go back to the drawing board and make some changes based on the things that went wrong in the test. And so you're sort of constantly refining the model. You're spending money while you're doing this to get the best outcome before you then sign off on the production. Then it goes into the tycoon the tycoon part of the game, which is a completely separate and probably the largest part of the game. That's your marketing. That's your paying your engineers, making sure that organizing the shifts. Are they going to be like people working overtime? Will people be working weekends? Are they going to be able to like meet the production schedules? Like it goes full out. Like it's insanely granular in terms of what you can do. And again, like Timmy said before, I feel like I've been talking a lot about it. I'm not going to get everything about this game in this pod. I can promise that to everyone right now. But I mean, do you guys have any questions about this game so far?
Yeah, I'm curious about, like, you set your demographic and stuff, right? So you've said, I want to make a family car and I want to target at whoever, what market and stuff. When you run these tests, you said, this comes out as the result, and perhaps that's not good because family cars need to be blah, 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 blah. does the game tell you that? Does it say this is not ideal for this kind of demographic, or is it up to you to understand the results and how they pertain to your demographic? And the reason I ask that is because I wonder if, like, picking the demographic before you've done everything makes it more difficult, or whether you can change that down the track. Like, you build your engine, then you realize, oh, this is way better for kind of like a muscle car kind of thing, and so you decide to go down that route, or is it like locked in at that point? So
No, it's not.
two-part question there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not locked in. And so the beauty of picking your demographic at the start is that you do get that feedback during the engineering process. And so once you run your test, it'll give you a big bunch of warnings in a different color, and some of the colors might be like a white, which means it's like it's an issue, but it's not like it's not like going to make the car unsafe or anything. But then it might be red, which means like, oh well, the type of engine that you've chosen with this type of drivetrain is causing the car to stall all the time. Like you have to fix this before you put it out. So you're getting constant feedback from your engineers. They're called. It's obviously the game, but in the game, it's the engineers are the ones who are telling you, hey, this design is wrong. We need to go back and fix this part. So even though that costs you money when you go back to fix some of that, it's not a difficult process. You don't feel like you've like lost out or you've wasted time. It's all part of the learning process. So I'm really grateful that they included that in the game, because then you're getting constant feedback instead of just like trial and erroring everything. You know where you're at in your design process. Makes it a lot simpler, especially for a game that like of this sort of length. I think a save game in this game is probably going to be going for easily into the hundreds of hours for a lot of people. Given that I've spent 10 hours and I've still only done the first year of manufacturing.
In terms of the campaign, does it, like you said, you started in the 40s and like you pick your target demographic. Is there is it kind of a setup where you start small? So could you choose in the campaign to be building like modern supercars from the start, or do you have to start small like that? And my other question about the campaign is like, is it just total sandbox, or does it kind of guide you towards certain goals and objectives?
Yeah, so it does guide you, and the scenarios are constantly changing. So throughout the decades, the demographics are always changing based on obviously like whatever's happening in the country that you're in. And certain events affect some of the things that maybe you want to go do a sports car because last year the demographics for sports car were like really strong and they're a sure thing. You were surely going to get a sale. Then you release a car that's really, really popular as like a luxury family sedan, then that might have an effect on whether or not you're able to go and revisit demographics in the past that, were good. Things are constantly changing. So you kind of have to adapt to the market situation. And yeah, so to your first question as well, what was your first question?
My first question was, in the campaign, do you like start small and you build your way up,
Yes.
or can you just choose to be like a Ferrari from the start?
Well, you can, but you're going to be always limited by the materials and the body shapes or aesthetics of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't just be like, I want to, you're in the 40s and you're like, I want to make a Ferrari F40 style production car with like carbon fiber, because it just doesn't exist.
Right, but could you
also,
could you choose a later era and build that car from the start, or would you have to build like a kind of a more like a car for a bigger market to make the money to upgrade your like company to make supercars or something?
well, there's a couple ways you can do it. So you can choose at the start of the campaign what decade you want to start in. So maybe you want to, you're not interested in making anything before the 2000s. So you start your campaign from the year 2000, and you're going to have all the available materials and research that's done for that point. That being said, if you did start in the 40s or 50s. Part of the game, you have factories, and some of those factories are research departments. So you've got R&D. So if you have made a lot of money, say from the first decade, let's say this, in the 40s, I make hundreds of millions of dollars off some successful cars. I can then spend the next decade making relatively cheap cars, but then focusing a lot of money into my research and development. And then I'll beat other companies to the access of like better materials or better research. So your cars, you can be like at the forefront of research and development for your car company, if you want to choose to go down that route. So you might be able to make slightly more modern cars ahead of everyone else. That being said, it still does have a pretty hard limit on the kind of body shapes that you use as the base of your design. So you might have like high-tech headlights or some kind of thing that you access before everyone else. The body shape of the car is still going to be sort of pretty reminiscent of whatever decade you're in. And I think that's a hard limit that the game has put on just for the purposes of being like accurate for the time periods.
That makes sense,
But
though.
but you can choose, or you've got a lot of control over if you want to be a company that sort of just goes with the flow, that follows the trends, or you might want to be someone who's like, all right, well, we're going to make a car that's ultra safe, that's really, really reliable, but it's going to have all this new technology in it, and materials going to be made out of space age materials because I've spent tens of millions of dollars researching this stuff to have it accessible before everyone else. So the other big part of the game as well is your marketing as well. So like this is all part of the business tycoon aspect. You need to spend a lot of money on marketing research. So obviously your demographic, but you can spend money further basically selling the car to a demographic, or even sometimes to other demographics that the car doesn't really apply to. You can sort of fudge it a little bit and be like, all right, well, this is a family car, but it's got quite a fast engine in it. It's going to give the marketing team a bit more to do when they want to sell this car to like, thrill seekers or something. So there's a lot of options and ways you can sell a car that isn't just following what you get with a demographic. So that's something I've had a lot of fun with in the business tycoon aspect, because once you've made your car, you sort of like, you don't just go straight back and make a new one. A lot of it is sort of keeping support for the models that you've already made. And so that's where the business development stuff comes in handy, like really, really getting into it, because your cars, you could do the brute force manufacturing way of just like releasing a car every year, but when you do that, you sacrifice the quality and the amount of cars that you can make, depending on like the manufacturing quality of the car or materials. So it's a very, very big game. There's a lot to learn. I feel like I haven't learned absolutely everything. There's a lot of stuff I've sort of glazed over because I just don't understand a lot of the terminology. But that being said, everything in the game has like a question mark button next to it. So if you don't know what something means, you can click on it and it will say, this is what this is, and this is why someone might choose this option over another option, or this part of the manufacturing process is devoted to this. This is how it works. So you don't ever feel like you're completely out of your depth in terms of the understanding, because it does walk you through a lot of the stuff you need to know contextually. So that's a big plus for the game.
Could you like just back quickly to like the kind of marketing, like business side? Is it possible that you could play the game and just focus on that? Like, would there be a way for someone to play this as like a business simulator and automate the kind of like nitty gritty mechanical side of things, or like do you kind of do you have to do both?
Well, that's where, as I mentioned earlier, when you get to the first part of the game after making your company, um, it asks you if you want to do everything from scratch or if you want to use the AI engineers, which is basically more or less skipping over the design aspects and then
Mm-hmm.
puts you straight into the shoes of the business part. So that's probably where you do that. That being said, there are still a few little things you need to go and refine even after the AI engineers do stuff. Um, I think the game always wants to throw you a few little challenges in that respect. But that being said, it probably almost omits the design process completely outside of just having to make a few little tweaks and then running like the test track um, to double check stuff before you sign off on a design to sell it.
Yeah,
So
okay.
you can go straight into the business management aspect. There are also other scenarios. So there's like the campaign, then there's the sandbox mode where you just make your cars without the business part. But then there's also a series of different scenarios where it's like uh, you're in a certain situation and you already have all the cars that you need and you're going to sell. So that's another way you could probably go into the business aspect. That being said, though, I mean, like, I could probably talk about this game for a very, very long time because there's just that much in it. I guess at the heart, I I'm enjoying it. Like, it's not the game I really thought it was going to be. I didn't think the business tycoon aspect was going to be as involved as it was. Um, but I've been really enjoying also just like making my own car designs just for the fun of it. In the sandbox mode as well. You know, like making you can kind of like if you're a car enthusiast and you've got an idea of a cool car you had in your mind, this is the game to play to be able to like fully realize it. And as I mentioned, I think last pod, you can actually export your designs into another game called BeamNG, which is a like a car physics simulator where you drive cars around. You can actually export your designs into that game and then drive them properly, as if you're like racing them and or testing them. So I haven't actually been able to do that yet because I haven't bothered. But um, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that translates. If it's like a one-to-one representation of the design you made in automation, or if it's simply just like exports a 3D model and then applies some properties or some loose properties so you can drive it around. So I haven't had any experience with that, but I think that's in the coming weeks while I'm playing this I'll probably uh, hopefully fire that up and get to experience actually driving some of my creations. But that's about it for automation that I can really get off the top of my head. Like I said, it's a huge game.
I just had one comment I wanted to make. When you said the game was called Automation and it was the most granular game you've ever played, just based on the name, I thought it was going to be like one of those idle clickers where you have to keep like all these different systems kind of running, and if that, then this kind of situations. Just like I thought it would be, automation, not like in terms of cars, in terms of just keeping things clicking over.
See, my initial thought was it was going to be one of those like sandbox factory games that are like for some reason have really taken off now. There's like 3 or 4 of them where it's just all you're doing is building enormous production chains. And I guess there's sort of a small element of that. But yeah, when I heard automation, my first thought was like, oh yeah, one of those factory sims.
Yeah,
Yeah,
makes sense.
no, misleading.
Well, hey, look, shall we move on from this because we got a little bit of time left in this episode, and we've got some listener mail which we haven't had any of for a little bit, and surprise, 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 it is regular emailer Josh who has got in touch with us here. And he says, "Hey team, love the special hardware episode. I was hoping for a Series X but missed out and luckily I was able to get a PS5. Side note here, Josh, let us know how that PS5 is, because I don't think any of us have a PS5. Chim, you're going to be the one who gets one soonest of us, I think. But yeah, Josh, we'd love to hear like how you're feeling that PS5 is. But Josh goes on to say, each of you pick a game that you would marry, a game you would kill, and a game you would kiss. So that's the G-rated version of this one. Looking forward to episode 50 from Josh. We are also looking forward to episode 50. But okay, so marry, kill, kiss in terms of games.
What does that what does that involve?
Right, yeah. Well, like we had when we got this email, we'd sort of mentioned that normally when you play this game, you're given the options. You know, like someone says like these 3 things, and you have to marry, kill, and kiss one of these. But Josh has just left it totally open to us for like all games ever. How do we do this?
So I guess marry means one game that you could play forever. Kill is a game that like not only can you never play again, but no one else can play again. You're taking it out.
Yeah,
that's just erased from the public consciousness.
That's a good one. It's like it's not just a game you don't like; it's a game that like you don't want to exist for anyone from now on.
Yep. And then I guess Kiss is a game that you can play real hard for one night and then never again.
Yeah,
Does that work?
I feel like that works. I feel like when you're not given sort of 3 to choose from, I like that you've got to kind of go really specific with the definitions of each. It can't be like and dislike.
Marry should be a game that you are committing to putting time into.
Oh yeah,
forever. Like not just like you have it's just not going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. Like you're committing to working on that relationship. All right, you're going to go to couples counseling with that game if need be.
I feel like at least for Paul and I, there is a game that we kind of already have married, right?
World of Warcraft.
Right. See, for me, it's like it's that. I think because I like that idea. It's like it's the game you're committed to putting time into, but it's the game you're committed to spending the future with, right? It's like kind of you know, for better or for worse, I'm committing to this game no matter where it goes in terms of its future development. Like I like it would be WoW or Football Manager for me. Like those are the 2 that I would say that like I'm along for the ride no matter what.
I'm going to have to say WoW as well, I think. WoW or at least some kind, maybe like even the Old Republic, because it's another MMO, you know, but it's a game that I can get on board with and stick around to see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
I guess for me, like the only game that I play with ongoing like development and growth and stuff is Destiny, right? Like I don't play any other games that, you know, like if I say Witcher, there is like a very much a finite point, right? I can keep doing New Game Plus, I suppose, but like I will have done everything, right? Like, yeah. So I guess it's Destiny. I don't really play anything else.
It sounds to me just like you know you don't want to be pinned down like that. Like you know you're just not the kind of guy who wants to just play one game forever.
I'm not a one game kind of guy, baby. No, but there's just plenty of me to go around, you see. But no, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I had a thought just then. Like, perhaps it's like a mobile game. Like, I'm trying to think of like what game have I had like installed on my phone that like I always go back to. You know, because there are a couple that like even if I get a new phone and I forget, like eventually I'll install one. But yeah, I don't know.
What's like What's the series or maybe like the franchise that like not just like the franchise you like the most, but the one that in the same way you just say like, all right, I'm committed to everything they release no matter what.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, can I compel Naughty Dog to keep making Uncharted games? Like, that's pretty solid. There's like 5 games there. And there's like a mobile one that a PS Vita one that I never played or something. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, maybe that franchise. Otherwise, like it'd be a pretty safe bet saying like Assassin's Creed, right? You're just gonna keep getting massive games almost too frequently.
It's like you'd just be like you'd be guaranteeing yourself like a certain level of quality. Maybe it's not amazing, but you'd be at least content with that for for all time. Maybe that's a good choice for marriage.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I thought we were still talking marriage. Sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying. That was that
yeah.
was the joke.
That was the joke. All right, sorry, I'm caught up now. I was just like still running lists of games in my head, like making sure I wasn't committing to the wrong game. All right, let's move on from marriage.
Yep. So games you'd kill.
Okay, so we're taking it out for everyone.
All right, JT,
no one else can play it.
JT, you've already got something. So while we're thinking, tell us what you got.
I've got a game that stung me a long time ago. back when I pre-ordered things. Empire Earth 3. The first 2 games were incredible. Empire 3 was a hot mess that I purchased full price. And yeah, I got really stung by that game. And so there's like personal vendetta.
So this is just this is simply
this is interesting because like you're picking a game that for all intents and purposes is already dead. It's like you're going to this game on its deathbed and being like natural causes is too good for you.
No longer will it hurt another wandering soul who's at a backyard sale, a garage sale. Oh, mummy, what's this game? No, I would blow that game's brains out. There you go.
So, but it's just like a revenge killing. That's basically what this is.
Yeah.
Like there's no greater good here. This is just vengeance for you.
Yeah, this is the serial killer that's been, he's been evading the authorities for like 50 years, but he hasn't killed anyone in 50 years. And I'm the detective. I'm the Matthew McConaughey who's just completely hung up on finding this guy and putting an end to him. So that's where that comes from.
Okay. All right. Tim, have you got anything?
Oh, I'm thinking. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of like, what's a game that like when I think about makes me like so genuinely angry that like, or has like influenced games in a way that I really don't like. And I'm wondering, like, see, you guys know my disdain for big online shooters and how like they're just like the biggest games and just like whenever there's gaming on a TV show or whatever, it's that. And I'm like, do I get rid of COD? No, because then something else just takes its place, right? There's like 1,000 of those. So I don't know. I'm still thinking, what's something that
I'm trying to think of like along the same lines. I'm trying to think of a game in a series that took that series in a direction that meant that I'm no longer interested in it, or it kind of, it sort of ruined a series that I don't go back to. And like, I'm sure there are better examples, but the first thing I can think of off the top of my head now is Mass Effect Andromeda. That, like a series that I loved that, that game sort of really set it back. But then like they've already announced they're making another one. So, I feel like it's kind of a cop-out answer because like that problem could already be fixed in the next couple of years. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of a better example.
Maybe along that same line of thinking in terms of developer, maybe you kill Anthem, free up all those developers from wasting all that time. You save BioWare's reputation, and hopefully they take their time and make something better.
That's a good one. I like the butterfly effect of that choice.
Yeah. I was thinking like here's a different way of looking at it, and this will surprise you to hear. Maybe I'll kill Doom 3. Just so that I won't forever be tortured by the fact that everyone hates it and they'll never make another game like Doom 3. Just like let Doom be Doom and let me stop being like obnoxiously indignant about liking that game.
That's a good one. All right, and here's my last suggestion for kill. My last suggestion for kill is World of Warcraft. To kill World of Warcraft so that it's just not there as a temptation for the rest of my life to take time away from other games and things like that. It'll never be the thing that I always go back to because it will just be gone. Maybe
I was almost going to make a joke about that. Like you guys both just committed to World of Warcraft during your polyamorous relationship, apparently. And and what if I now kill it? I've just like ruined your futures. Gone.
We've both married World of Warcraft, but we're like completely disappointed in our marriage, and it's turns into this murder suicide in the same deal. Sorry, got a bit dark there.
All right, yeah, this has got really dark. So let's move it on to which game would we kiss? As Timmy said, which game would we just want to spend one night with?
I'll go first again because I've been thinking about this since Josh sent in we knew about the question. I'm gonna say Left 4 Dead because that's a game that I love the absolute crap out when I play that, but every time I play it, it's always just it is just for a night. You've got a couple friends who are also keen to get into a game with you. You play through all the campaigns. Usually in a night you just go one after the other because they're pretty short and sweet. You're done. I'm going to say Left 4 Dead.
All right, you know what I'm going to do?
And Left 4 Dead's sister, Left 4 Dead 2.
If we can pick 1 and 2s, then I'm going to smash out Half-Life and Half-Life 2 because I struggle to go back to older games in terms of their handling and their appearance. But that one seems like such a big blind spot for me, and like it's so important to the great pantheon of video games. And like everyone always talks about it, I need to experience it. I just need to knock it out. And I'm unlikely to go back to it, but I want to know.
So it's like the one that got away, and you just have to know what it would have been like.
That's it. All right, who are you smooching, Paul?
I don't know. I feel like I don't have a good answer for this. I feel like so many of the games I play are like I play so many games that are just open and you play them forever that I don't know what the one is that I would, that would be my kiss option here. Like if it's just that same kind of thing, like I don't know, to be honest. Like the thing I kind of think of is like maybe like Last of Us or Uncharted as a thing that I just kind of play once and then move on. But I feel like that's what everyone does with those games. So it's not like it's not a great option. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Like I didn't prepare for this question. I
say World of Warcraft again.
I think that's a good note to leave it on.
Alrighty. Well, sounds like that'll about do us. If you have got a question, like our good friend Josh there often has, you can send it through to us on our Gmail, which is discanddice@gmail.com. If you would prefer to get in touch with us on some form of social network or media, we're on everything. You can get us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Just search Disc and Dice. On Instagram, it's Disc and Dice Podcast, but it should still come up for you. We also are part of the Raptor Mountain Discord community, which we get questions and discussion in there. We normally drop into that a little bit of a teaser about what we're going to be talking about so that you can get your questions in before you listen to the podcast. So, if you had played T.I.M.E Stories or were wondering about it or Tang Garden or automation, you could get in on the conversation before it even happens and we can address your thoughts or suggestions on the podcast. To get the link to that one, it's in the link in our bio on Instagram. We also include it in the description of our videos on YouTube. So feel free to get in on that one. But other than that, thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back in a fortnight's time, hopefully having survived the heat, hopefully with a probationary driver's license under my in my wallet.
Fingers crossed.
And hopefully with a whole bunch of other games. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's the big 5-0.
Yeah. Let's not glaze over it.
No. Let's milk it for all it's worth.
We've been milking it since the 25th episode. So.
Yeah.
This had better be good, guys.
There. Yeah. All right. What's it going to be? I guess you'll have to tune in and find out.
Yeah. We'll see you all for episode 50.
Bye-bye.
Bye.